I'm Mark Baer. Welcome to the YourTown television program. My guest today, Doug McKnight, longtime journalist emeritus, a fellow member of the Access Monterey Peninsula board member with myself. And these early shows here, we're just trying to get up and running and talk about the potential of both community television, the potential of a show like this. We're both boosters trying to promote the area in which we live because we live in a special place. And it's an amazing new future.
Yeah, it is.
So,
it is.
I mean, you've been involved in television for over 50 years. What have you seen that's changed over all this time?
Pretty much everything. I started in the 60s. I went to school in the 60s. So it was, as you said, 50 years ago. And when I started, there were 3 television stations in a community. And that was it. They all made money. They did local programming. They all had children's programs. They all had programs, cooking programs or travel programs, and then news. And news was really done as a community service. They didn't realize there was actually money to be made at it. And it's evolved, and it was done on film. I remember writing scripts on paper as a news writer, and at the top in the left-hand corner, we would put information about the story for the director. And for many years, I put COL on the top, which meant the video was in color instead of black and white. So it's changed. It's no longer film, it's video. Anybody can do it. You can do it on your cell phone. And broadcasting has scattered. There was a time in the 70s when we used to get overnight ratings. And the overnight ratings were 400 boxes on sets throughout the Bay Area. And across the top of the report would be all the stations from the lowest channel to the highest channel. And on the far right column would be a thing called Other, which was cable. And for a long time it was 5% or 4%. And then it became 8%, and then it became 10%, and then it became 50% at one point. And I don't know what it is today. So more and more players came in, but the audience stayed the same, and so the slices of the pie got smaller and smaller. Stations got rid of local programming except for news, and they focused on just trying to make money and survive. So that's changed, and that continues as we go forward.
Where do you see things headed now?
The internet, it's hard to believe that the internet, which has changed everything else in our lives, from newspapers to shopping, is not going to change broadcasting. And so I think that more and more people are going to listen to streaming, are going to listen and watch podcasts that are individually produced. I have to admit, the fine print is I'm very, very bad at predicting the future. One time I remember covering technology and somebody telling me they were going to put cameras in phones. And I went, "Thank you, want to put a camera in a phone for? That doesn't make any sense."
I mean, just think how fast. I remember being involved in creating, the idea to create art for the internet, and it was always 5 years away. Oh, you're gonna have broadband in 5 years, and that 5 years seemed like a long time away. And then suddenly it's here, and then suddenly it seems like it's going so fast now.
It does. The adaptation does take a while, and in some cases, people have to buy new equipment, and there's a cost associated with it. I saw HD TV in the 90s, in the early 90s, and I went, wow, this is revolutionary. I mean, you can look at that picture, it's so real. And it really didn't get going until, 2009, 2010, when people really started buying sets. So it takes 10 or 15 years, but then it just takes over. And I don't know how many standard definition televisions there are around, but not many. And so, yeah, you're right. And what I think is going, one of the things we do know about people is they want to watch what they want to watch when they want to watch it. thus the DVRs. But the ultimate in that is take it with you on your cell phone or your iPad or your, tablet or whatever, and watch it when you want to watch it.
Now, just thinking about this show, and we've been talking about what's now possible, and again, the YourTown show, I believe, started in 2006. It started as a radio show first, then it became a television show that was much watched. This is a known brand. Then it went off the air for a few years, and we're in the process of bringing it back. And in bringing it back, everybody watched the show at 6 o'clock at the same time, and that was the viewing. Well, now you'll still have that opportunity to watch it at a fixed time. But our thinking now is much different in terms of, well, we expect people to watch it online.
Right.
We expect to be able to have conversation about it online. We expect people to be able to interact with our guests through what happens online, to be able to contact, to ask questions, to continue the conversation. This is just, we're starting to take this for granted, but
it's revolutionary.
This
is
really
very
revolutionary.
Because, broadcast communication was always one way. In fact, the title broadcasting, which incidentally was devised up I think in San Jose at the first radio station, was an agricultural term. It was to broadcast seeds. Okay, so it was one way. And now it's a conversation. It can go both ways. People can give you feedback immediately, for good and for ill. Sometimes it can be hijacked by an individual. So there are things to be concerned about. But it also engages the audience a lot more than just sitting there and listening or watching something. So I think there are great opportunities, and I think we're wise to keep the program over a traditional television channel, because the revolution hasn't been complete. Many people still watch television and don't podcast.
Again, I would always prefer to have something that I've made or I'm involved with that somebody's seeing it on a big, giant screen. I don't want to, my preference isn't to be seen on a phone.
Right.
So there is a place for that, but there's a convenience, and they're not in opposition. These are different things. But what has changed radically is in the newspaper business is the local newspaper, which is used to be a voice of record, used to be where we knew what was happening in our community. That has changed very much. So what we're doing here as community television, and what that takes on new relevance.
It does.
And I'm going to let you kind of speak about how we dream this, how we think about this. What are the opportunities that you see here?
Well, I think it's in addition to the local newspaper. The local newspaper, has it's been difficult times for them because people get news for free, and so they can get it off the internet as opposed to pay for it. I think newspapers made a mistake early on in posting their stories on the internet, but so it has. But I think there's always a place for an analysis of the information, a vetting of the information. I think what we do is in addition to that, and particularly the broadcast of city council meetings and county board of supervisor meetings and committee meetings that AMP does, because a lot of people can't go and attend those. And to the extent that we can index them, and to the extent that this program can help, fill out that information and enrich that information, it's just more information. It's from a different perspective. And as you said, it's interactive. It's one in which you can provide feedback. And the thing for local government is that in recent years the amount of coverage has declined. And I'm not reflecting on any governmental body here, but I can just tell you generally, when people are not watching an institution, stuff happens.
Right.
It just eventually happens. And no disrespect for anyone who's currently in office or anything here, but there has to be a watchdog. And AMP provides that in a way that a commercial television station or even a newspaper can't. And in fact, I would imagine, I'm pretty sure this is true, the newspapers, because there are several here, and broadcast outlets monitor the council meetings and the chamber meetings and all of those things that we broadcast rather than send to reporters. So that information goes out, but this is the original source.
Let's take the wider view again. Now, what TV, you've seen it changed again. News reporting, you've seen it change. Let's talk about some of the things that you think are controversial and controversies in the news today.
Well, there's broadcast journalism has always been somewhat controversial, and you know, years ago when I was in school studying communication, we talked about no one likes to have their core beliefs challenged. No one does. I don't. You don't.
Yeah.
And so the first thing we do when we hear something that challenges our core beliefs is reject it. And so I think that happens. What's happening now is there are alternative news sources coming up so you can tune and only listen to what you want to hear.
To stay in your own silo, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And unfortunately that's unhealthy because no one, myself included, knows everything and is right all the time. And nobody bats 1,000 in life.
Yeah, and we're not going back to the big three.
And we're not going back to the big three. No, that train has left.
Yes.
And so, you know, what AMP does and what programs like this do is provide another source for people to watch. And, you know, I hope that people will be open-minded about listening to things that may challenge their beliefs and just weigh it and give it the test that you would any information. You know, what's the source? Who is this person? Do I trust them? Do they have an axe to grind? Are they telling me something that benefits them? Are there other people who tell me the same thing? The usual ways we vet news in a newsroom, people have to do on their own now because all of the sources are coming at them from different angles.
So here you get to hear your neighbors.
Yeah.
And we have some very interesting neighbors. We live in an interesting community.
We do. It's really an amazing area. You know, obviously I love being here, and most everyone I've ever met who lives here loves being here too. I often think that here just on the peninsula, and I know you broadcast county-wide, but just here on the peninsula, there are 4 universities that offer advanced degrees. What area of 100,000 people or so can say that? You know, it's an educationally rich area. It's physically beautiful. There are people who are engaged. There are amazing people. There are movie stars who live here. There are military people, high-ranking military people who are retired who live here. Monterey has its own symphony. San Jose doesn't have its own symphony. I mean, we have music groups that are here. We have art. We have theater. It's a truly, truly amazing area, and we need to celebrate it.
And I always see this as, you know, both a local place, a small town, but a small town with a global footprint. Everybody in the world knows about Pebble Beach. Everybody knows about Carmel. Everybody knows about the Monterey Aquarium.
Right.
It's a global destination. We are on the fringes of or part of Silicon Valley. We are part of the Salinas Valley. The nation is looking to us for answers. I'm particularly interested in the Middlebury Institute, doing amazing stuff. I'm particularly interested in the Naval Postgraduate School, doing amazing stuff. CSUMB is the newest in the chain, and they're doing radical stuff. You were with your KZU offices were there. To kind of talk about being close to that.
Well, it's interesting. Public radio, which is obviously there is commercial radio, and just a little bit of background because I don't know that everybody knows this. When the FM band was created, okay, which would have been just before World War II, but it really accelerated after World War II because of the technology was developed. When they formalized it, when the FCC formalized it and said we're going to issue a license, they did something which was interesting and different. They said we're going to reserve the lower channels for non-commercial broadcasting. So in other words, the stations in those lower channels cannot do commercials. And the idea was just what AMP is doing. They wanted them to be community stations. And so stations tried, and it's hard. as we know on AMP, it's hard to generate programs where you're depending upon donations to get the critical mass together. And so the stations came along. What happened in a lot of those cases is the stations were started by universities. Universities saw that as an extension of what they do and served two purposes, because I used to get asked at the university, why don't we own a radio station? One is it fulfills the university's obligation to lifelong learning, okay? And two is it provides an outreach to the community. So a lot of stations, probably 2/3 of them, are either university owned or owned by institutions, community institutions. For us, what was magic about it is we got to interact with students. We got to see young people and provide for them. I don't know because it varies a little bit. While I was there, we always had an intern for every staff member. So half the station at any given time. They were part-time. The interns work 20 hours a week because they're there to study, not to work. They're paid. But they always brought an energy and a dynamic and a knowledge of developing technology that may not have been present in the station at the time. The other thing that happened is we began to learn about the great work that CSUMB is doing in marine science, in business. They've got an incredible business school there, and now developing in athletics. And so it's also becoming now, I think, greater than just a university. It's reaching out into the community.
It's just part of the university. And this is, again, another special thing. The professors are accessible. Right. What goes on there is accessible. Yeah. I just feel, there's something special. I want to use this last minute. One of the great things about KAZU is and again, I sent my check into KAZU every month.
Thank you.
And I always and then I also used advertising on KAZU, and I felt that it was always money well spent. It was a pleasure to work with them, and I'm hoping that we can create some kind of similar situation with this program for underwriting and give the underwriters good value. It's a two-way street. So that's part of that underwriting, and how to afford a show like this and how to keep an organization like AMP going is something that we'll be ongoingly thinking about. And I'll save that conversation for another time. And I'm Mark Baer. You're watching the YourTown television program. I'm with Doug McKnight, and we'll be back. Thank you so much.